I sort of like a little boy his first day at school. Mama got him off and he went on to school and came home, and he had been so excited when he left, the first time, and he was so excited about going to school. Came home. Mama said, "Well, did you like it? How was your first day?" And he said, "I'm not going back." And she said, "What on earth happened?" And he said, "Well, I can't read and I can't write and they won't let me talk and I'm not going back." So I was just beginning to think, he's not going to let me talk. Gotcha, Pinky. My name is Willie, and I am an alcoholic. And I'm going to try real hard. Us Texans can't talk very fast, real good. So I'm going to try to talk a little faster so I can have some time at the end to let some of y'all share with me. We're going to take up step 5 this evening, page 55 of our 12 and 12. Charlie and Joe give us so beautifully what our big book says about step 5. And they'll be coming along doing that. Isn't that what y'all have next, Joe? Y'all coming up on step 5. And what's in the big book is so very, very vital. So I'm not going in any depth except to acquaint you with what is in our 12 and 12 so that you can take it and study it. Even if you have done this step yourself, maybe it'll give you a little bit better understanding of working with that new person that wants to take step 5 with you. Make you review your own step 5. But as we look at it here in the 12 and 12, the basic principle, I think, behind this step is integrity. Integrity. And as Joe and Charlie said this morning, this is our second step of action. The second step that we really get into doing something about this thing. We're not just sitting around thinking about it anymore, making decisions and turning our wills and things like that. Now we are doing. On step 4, we took that inventory. And taking that inventory will not do that shopkeeper or you any good. I found that when I took that inventory, I had to do something with it. I had to take the truth that I had found out, even those that hurt terribly, the truth about what had happened to Willie, what alcohol had done to her. And I tried to sidestep this step for a long time. But as we read in the 12 and 12 and the big book, we see that we're not alone in this. And I think it makes us feel a little bit better. We admit it to God and to ourselves and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Not so much, and as a teacher, I don't know why I could not really read what was written well. But when I read that statement, the word wrongs popped out at me so quickly. And it held me back for such a long time. Just the word wrongs. Because I put those along with all the things that I had done while I was drinking. And it says the nature of our wrongs. What caused me to do these things? In between. Because I didn't stay drunk all the time. I was like so many women alcoholics. I was periodic. I was not a daily drinker. I went into my classroom every day. I never lost a job. I was there. So many times I was robbing the taxpayers of the United States of really their full due, because I wasn't all there, but the body was there. And on those long periods of sobriety, what had happened to me that made me think and feel and believe, all in between, when I was not drinking, these were the things that I had to face. What had alcohol done to me as a human being? What it had done to me with the dignity part of being a decent human being. Because as I told you this morning, it had turned me into a liar and a cheat and a person that did not know the true from the false. As we look back on our four absolutes that they're so beautifully woven into the program that came from our Oxford group. You know, the absolute honesty and purity and unselfishness and love. If we can carry these through these fourth and fifth steps with us, to be absolutely honest, all we have to do is to ask ourselves one question. Is it true or is it false? That's all honesty is all about. And that's all that they said I would have to do for the rest of my life. In dealing with life's, all of its problems and all of its even good, everything. All of the people that I would come in contact with. If I was to deal with them honestly, then all I had to do was to ask myself that one question. Is what I'm feeling true or is it false? And that would help keep me in line. As far as the purity is concerned, all I had to do was ask myself, is it right or is it wrong? Is what I'm feeling right or wrong? Is what I'm fixing to do, is it right or wrong? And you know, we have an instinct in us that tells us immediately what's wrong and what's right. Because if we have to stop and think about it too long, we better look out, because it's probably bordering on wrong. Because you know, when you're fixing to do something right, you don't really have to stop and think about it. And that takes pretty good care of our striving towards absolute purity. And as far as absolute unselfishness, all we have to do is ask ourselves the question, how will it affect others? Everybody in my orbit, how will it affect others? What I'm fixing to do, or how I'm feeling right now? How will it affect this man that I'm living with? How will it affect my son? How will it affect my father? How will it affect the people in my group, the girls that I sponsor? So taking care of unselfishness is not all that hard with that simple question. How will it affect other people? And on our absolute love, all I have to do is ask myself, is it ugly or is it beautiful? That's all. You know, you can make love ugly. It can be an ugly thing. When we love and possess and hold on and rule and absolutely have to have everything our way with those people that we love, then it turns into something ugly. So that's all I have to do on that absolute. And I found out that they weren't all that with these things to rule my life and just trying to do these things, then I really had nothing to fear of looking that other human being in the eye. And that I had to do, because I had talked to God about these things I had found in step 4. I had talked to myself about them. I had tried to, but you know, sometimes when you're talking to yourself, you have a tendency to rationalize and to make excuses. But when you're looking at another person right square in the eye to tell them the nature of your wrongs, it gets down to you have to look at that honesty. Is it true or is it false? All of AA's 12 steps ask us to go contrary to our natural desires. They all deflate our ego. When it comes to ego deflation, few steps are harder to take than 5. But scarcely any step is more necessary to long-time sobriety and peace of mind than this one. AA's experience has taught us we cannot live alone with our pressing problems and the character defects which cause or aggravate them. We can't continue living with these problems if we're going to let them affect our thinking and our action. If we have swept the searchlight of step 4 back and forth over our careers, and it has revealed in stark relief those experiences that we'd rather not remember, if we have come to know how wrong thinking and action have hurt us and others, then we need to quit living by ourselves with those tormenting ghosts of the yesterday gets more urgent than ever. We have to talk to somebody about it. And as I said this morning, I was so busy into the excuse making. I was married to a military man, a career officer. We lived in the fast lane. Most service people do. And I don't know how it is today, but it was that way back then. I used the excuse for such a long time of the fact that I absolutely could not live with this man if he continued to drink. And he had informed me very quietly and very carefully that that's exactly what he intended to do. Because he said, you have the problem, you solve it. But I will not quit drinking. See, he had talked to some AAs, and they had told him that Willie will do when she gets ready what she has to do. And your drinking is not going to affect her one way or the other. Now, whether that was good advice or bad advice, I don't know. I'll kill them if I ever get a hold of them. Because it did make that road terribly rough in the beginning. Because he took that and he ran with it. And he said, no, I'm not going to quit drinking. I don't have a problem. So immediately, see, Willie, with what alcohol had done to me, I begun to create a problem. I began to try to convince him that, oh, yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do. And not knowing the true from the false, I had continued to stay sober unhappily and continued to beat myself about the fact that I had to live with this drinking man. I was told by a couple of people, get rid of him. I didn't want him. I had worked too hard to get him. And I wanted to hang on to him. But I used it as an excuse. It was an untruth that I was dealing with, because I was determined that I could not stay sober if he continued to drink in front of me. And see, that when you got down to the real nitty-gritty, and when I got eyeball to eyeball with that other woman, she said to me in that beautiful Montgomery, Alabama accent, she said, well, Willie, which took about 10 minutes, do you reckon, honey, that you might be just a little bit envious of him because his drinking does not create any problems like yours did? Uh-huh. But see, as long as I kept talking to myself, I couldn't see that obvious truth. That obvious truth. So I would go and I would moan and groan and bellyache to these men about, you have it made. Your wives have gotten the booze out of the house, and they go along with everything, and they try to give you lots of good food and not make you want alcohol, and they cooperate with you, and here I have to go home and, wade through the booze. And y'all have it just easy. Y'all just don't understand how difficult my life is. And God bless them, they would just sit there. And finally one day, one of them said, Willie, I'm going to tell you a little story about a fellow we had out here that had been sober a long time, and he drove a beer truck. And somebody asked him, George, how in the world do you stay sober and drive that beer truck? Go in and out of those old taverns handling that beer? How in the world do you do it? And old George said, well, if I drove a garbage truck, I wouldn't eat the garbage. So that shot my legs out from under me. But when I got to really, the truth couldn't take place as long as I was just talking to me and even to God. It had to be done out loud with the eyes of that other woman drunk looking at me. Those excuses came so easily. I would be able to rationalize anything that I did until I looked into her eyes. Because I could make excuses at the drop of a hat. Sort of like the fellow they jerked out of the burning building, and they shook him around a little bit, and they said, Jim, we have told you not to smoke in bed. And he said, hell, the bed was on fire when I got in it. But see, when I was looking Rose in those beautiful eyes of hers, I couldn't make those excuses because they were untruths. And that's what step 5 promises you will happen to you when you try this. When you do, take it on the step further from admitting to God and to yourselves and to another human being. Down at the bottom of page 55, so intense, though, is our fear and our reluctance to do this, to talk to somebody else, that many AAs at first try to bypass step 5. We search for an easier way, which usually consists of the general and fairly painless admission that when drinking we were sometimes bad actors. Then, for good measure, we add dramatic descriptions of that part of our drinking behavior which our friends probably know about anyhow. And we have a tendency to sit there in meeting after meeting after meeting and share with other people our experiences while we were drinking. And that's not what step 5 is all about, but that's what I thought it was all about. I thought if I shared all of these terrible things that I had done when I was drunk, that's what the wrongs were. I wasn't getting down to the nature. But of the things which really bothered and burn us, we say little, nothing. Certain distressing or humiliating memories we tell ourselves ought not to be shared with anyone. These will remain our secret. Not a soul must ever know. We hope they'll go to the grave with us. And what I was needing to do, instead of sharing those humiliating experiences, what I needed to do with Rose was what made me do these things? What trait have I developed that made me do the things in between the drinking? What had turned me into a liar? What had turned my life completely away from what I wanted to? What had robbed me of my dignity? What had robbed me of real pride, genuine pride, in a job well done? What had done these things? That's what I needed to find out. Yet if AA's experience means anything at all, this is not only unwise, but is actually a perilous resolve. Few muddled attitudes have caused us more trouble than holding back on step 5. Some people are unable to stay sober at all, and others will relapse periodically until they really clean house. That sounds like a promise to me. One that makes me run scared enough to do what I'm told. If I could have just done it a little sooner. I guess, though, I did it in God's time. Even AA old-timers, sober for years, often pay dearly for skipping on this step. They'll tell how they tried to carry the load alone, how much they suffered of irritability, anxiety, remorse, and depression. See, they're sober, and they're the old-timers in the group. They're sitting there, well, hell, 10, 15, 20 years. And they're suffering periodically from one of these 4 things. They're irritable and cross. They suffer from anxiety. They suffer from the remorse that they're still holding on to, and depression. And how, unconsciously seeking relief, they would sometimes accuse even their best friends of the very character defects that they themselves are trying to conceal. They always discovered that relief never came by confessing the sins of other people. Everybody had to confess his own. That little paragraph sort of assures me that if I don't do a good job of step 5, that I can go along and stay sober. I might be able to do this for a period of time, even for a long period of time. But they tell me that it might come back to haunt me. And that's why when I really sat down on that Sunday afternoon and started in with this step 5 with Rose, I didn't want to hold any of these little dark crannies back. I didn't want to make excuses anymore. I wanted to look that problem of living with this man and letting him do what he wanted to do. It was not hurting him nor me. Not when I looked it square in the eye. Because he is an absolute, I don't want to use the word controlled, because he's the type of drinker that every time he drinks all he wants. He doesn't have any more trouble now than he did when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. He's drinking the same amount. It's absolutely repulsive to watch this man drink. But see, when I saw it for what it was, just one of my excuses for not making any progress in this program, then I butted out of his life and left that man alone. And you know, he's been eternally grateful for that. Because I had gotten where every time he would, we would go to the officers club and we would be sitting there. I'd be sipping on that Coke and he'd be down in those martinis. And I would start plotting how I was going to fix him that next day. Now see, people, I was pretending to try to live this program. But I would actually sit there and plot. And the next morning, of course, the first thing I would do would run up my little Mary Martyr flag and start waving it with, how can you do this to me? How can you put me through this? I think something I read recently, I ran across, I had seen it before, but I ran across it recently, sort of summed it up. The problem is not the problem. The problem is my attitude about the problem. When my attitude began to change, and I didn't keep punishing this man for his drinking, then the problem didn't exist anymore. Because see, all these years later, he's still drinking every day of the world. And that's okay, because it's not my problem anymore. Just the attitude changed, and that's all. He didn't change. I didn't change anything except my attitude. And that's what step 5 helped me to see, the truth. The truth. Down in the middle of the paragraph at the bottom of page 56, start there with the word that says psychiatrist and psychologist point out the deep need every human being has for practical insight and knowledge of his own personality flaws and for a discussion of them with an understanding and trustworthy person. Every good psychologist, every good psychiatrist knows that this is good therapy. There are therapy groups where people get together and talk about every problem under the world now. Everything that you can think of has a therapy group to go with it now. And that's good, because these people can help each other. They can share this common ground. They are using not what we thought up, but what psychiatrists and psychologists have been knowing for years, that it's good to talk to another human being about these personality flaws. We can see them a lot better. On page 57, second paragraph down, when we reached AA and for the first time in our lives stood among people who seemed to understand, the sense of belonging was tremendously exciting. We thought the isolation problem had been solved. It hurts me when a newcomer comes in and thinks that I can share with the entire group my 5th step, and that'll take care of it. Because I feel close to these people. I feel like that as a group they understand. And if we gently guide them and show them that it says admitted to another human being, it's singular, not plural. But the excitement of coming in and finding people that understand is a beautiful thing, and we think the problem has been solved. But we soon discovered that while we weren't alone anymore in a social sense, we still suffered many of the old pangs of anxious apartness. Even though we felt like we belonged, we suffered the pangs of anxious apartness. Until we had talked with complete candor about our conflicts and had listened to someone else do the same thing. We still didn't belong. Step 5 was the answer. It was the beginning of the true kinship with man and God. And isn't that a beautiful promise? A true kinship with man and God. Because that's what the rest of my life is going to be all about. The feeling that I have about mankind and the feeling I have towards the God of my understanding. This final step was also the means by which we began to get the feeling that we could be forgiven, no matter what we had thought or done. Not just for the things that we had done. It says, no matter what we had thought or done. Often it was while working on this step with our sponsors or our spiritual advisors that we first felt truly able to forgive others, no matter how deeply we felt they had wronged us. Our moral inventory had persuaded us that all-around forgiveness was desirable, but it was only when we resolutely tackled step 5 that we inwardly knew we'd be able to receive forgiveness and give it to. Because when I sat there and looked into Rose's eyes and told her about Willie, the truth about Willie, I found that I was going to be able to forgive Willie. And if I can forgive myself, then I'm going to be able to understand any woman drunk that I look into her eyes. And when I talk to her, I'm going to be able to understand her. I'll be able to go back and forgive those that did things to me in the past, or that still are doing it to me now. Because there's a world out there. God, wouldn't it be nice sometimes, I think, if we could just live in a room like this, where there's lots of love and lots of caring and no hurting, no people that are sort of out there to get you, because they're out there. And if we're going to leave this room and we're going to go back out into that world Sunday. And we better be prepared to do some forgiving, because it's going to hurt us if we don't. And this is where we learn this beautiful jewel of, when we forgive ourselves, we learn to forgive others too. Another great dividend that we may expect from confiding our defects to another human being is humility, a word that's often misunderstood. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are. That's all humility is. It's not sackcloth and ashes. It's not going up on a mountaintop and contemplating our navels for the next 3 or 4 years. Humility, as I think put here in the 12 and 12, what and who we really are. The truth. And it scratches a little bit in the beginning, but then, you get comfortable with it, because you know you can change it. You can change the things that you have found out that you don't like. And that's a beautiful opportunity, because we have lots of dodo birds out there that are running around with these untruths, and they don't know how to change them. They pay thousands and thousands of dollars to therapists and psychiatrists and come right out, and they're poor and still have their faults. And we have a way that we can get rid of them. We have a opening to this word humility by trying to find out of knowing what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. There's not any of us sitting here that can't be better tomorrow than we are today. Not one of us. If we extend one simple kindness to someone, they don't have to be a fellow member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why don't we start with somebody we love, somebody we live with, somebody that's close to us? You know, I came in with the whole evangelistic type approach, you know, when I started feeling so good that I was like Bill, I was going to go out and change the world. And I forgot about my man. Why couldn't I start with him? Why couldn't I back off and leave that man be? Why couldn't I add some happiness to his life? To look at the people closest to me first and say, maybe, Willie, you can add a little bit to their lives by keeping your hands off of their lives. And they don't really need all of your profound thoughts about their behavior. Maybe they can get along without all this profundity and all of this good advice. I sit around in AA meetings now and I think sometimes, my God, somebody changed the preamble and didn't tell me about it. I think New York is not putting out their bulletins very carefully because they have changed the preamble. When it says that we share our experience and our strength and our hope. That's what I thought the preamble said, but in some meetings that I sit in nowadays, they have added a word. And I think I'm going to call New York if I get any more frantic about it and see if they've added the word advice. Because I hear a lot of advice being given now. And thank God, mine came in the form of suggestions. And Willie, why don't you try? And that was so much better than, now Willie, here's what you ought to do. I like for people to give me suggestions. I like for them to say, hey Willie, why don't you try this? Whether it's an egg recipe or what it is. And that's what I want us to sort of get back to that. But all now, here's what you ought to do. Because, see, I don't have that right to tell another human being what I think they ought to do. All I can share with them is what I think maybe I might do if I had those same circumstances. And to deal with the feeling that's behind that problem of theirs that they're talking to me about. To deal with what feeling it's bringing out. And if I can get them to get their feelings straightened out, as Rose did with me, then they're going to deal with that problem the very best possible way, without any advice from me. To see me for what I really am, and to know what I could be. Therefore, our first practical move towards humility must consist of recognizing our deficiencies. No defect can be corrected unless we clearly see what it is. But we shall have to do more than see squiggly writing. We're going to have to do more than see it. The objective look at ourselves we achieved in step 4 was, after all, only a look. All of us saw, for example, that we lacked honesty and tolerance, that we were beset at times by attacks of self-pity and delusions of personal grandeur. But while this was a humiliating experience, it didn't necessarily mean that we had yet acquired much actual humility by just seeing this about ourselves. That's not where the humility comes from. Though we had not yet acquired much humility, though now recognized our defects were still there, sometimes something had to be done about them, and we soon found that we could not wish or will them away by ourselves. Seeing them was not enough. I was clinging to all of my old ideas still, to myself. I had seen so many things in step 4 that I didn't like. But just seeing them wasn't good enough. I had worked up a lot of hate. People, places, things, circumstances. And I didn't realize that I was clinging on to that hate just as hard as I could. Because, see, to let go, I realized that the pain would start. And that's why most people hold on to hate. It's because when you do let go, once you let that go, I'll be forced to deal with the pain. See, the tools are there to equip me to deal with whatever pain comes out. The bottom of the page, more realism and therefore more honesty about ourselves are the great gains that we make under the influence of Step 5. As we took inventory, we began to suspect how much trouble self-delusion had been causing us. This had brought a disturbing reflection. If all our lives we had more or less fooled ourselves, how could we now be so sure that we weren't still self-deceived? How could we be certain that we had made a true catalog of our defects and had really admitted them, even to ourselves? Because we were still bothered by fear and self-pity and hurt feelings. It was probable we couldn't appraise ourselves fairly at all. Too much guilt and remorse might cause us to dramatize and exaggerate our shortcomings. Our anger and hurt pride might be the smokescreen under which we were hiding some of our defects while we blamed others for them. Possibly, too, we were still handicapped by many liabilities, great and small, we never knew that we had. See, I was still suffering from hurt feelings. I was still ready to blame anybody. I have a little sign. I have signs all over my house, and one of them says, if you make a mistake, quick, blame somebody. Because I want to remind myself how quickly I can do that. I know I had been bellyaching and carrying on for such a long time about my husband's continuing to drink, and finding every possible tool that I could to make this man quit doing that. Just telling him not to do it wasn't working. So I pulled out all my womanly wiles. Tears, pouting, the good old standby, the silent treatment. All of the little woman things that I could possibly do. And I remember one time, people will show you the truth if you're listening for it. And Rose had gotten me ready to hear it when it came my way. Between Rose and God, they were making me listen. I kept moaning and groaning, and I kept with this thing about, I thought, okay, I'll get around him another way, and he'll cut this drinking out, and then it won't bother me so much. And I told him, I said, you don't know what you do to me. You come in here for afternoon off that flight line, and you're tense and everything, and you shake up that pitcher of martinis, and you sit there and you drink that, and I can just see the tiredness and the tenseness rolling off of you. And I say, I've been here all day long, and I'm trying to deal with this baby that I had had after 10 years of marriage, by the way. And I would say, I've been trying to deal with the baby, and I don't know anything about babies anyhow. And I get so tired, and I get nervous. And my man looked right straight at me, and he said, hell, just be nervous. Now you think about that a minute. That's real, real good advice. Just be nervous. Did you ever hear of anybody shaken to death? Of course, he's lived to regret those words. Because I enjoy being nervous now. I get up in the mornings and announce, this is my nervous day, and I intend to be nervous all day long. And I'm going to make as many people around me nervous as I possibly can. But the thing of it is, I know that it's not going to hurt me. God gave me a nervous system. I don't have to poke a pill into myself. I don't have to take a drink. I don't have to put anything inside my body. I can just be nervous and enjoy it. I've never had to, go on a diet. I just shake a lot. But what AA had been trying to tell me was to be what I could be. So I take these things that are natural and right. What's wrong with being down? As long as I don't tell myself I'm depressed. Because depressed is such a depressing word. If I can just tell myself, I'm having a little bit of a tan day here. I've lived through a period in my sobriety where, there were days when I was so nervous I could thread a sewing machine and it was running. But see, we both lived through those too. Girls, enjoy your nervous days. Enjoy your down days. Because how you going to know when you're having an up day if you don't have a down day once in a while? Things don't always have to be peaches and cream. Sometimes they can be sort of blah. It makes us appreciate the good times more. Just being. Seeing is not enough. Okay, I promised and I'm going to do it if it heralds everybody in Georgia. You didn't hear that? That's one reason microphones, I don't like microphones. They pick up every little thing you say. Please share with me some of your thoughts on step 5, whether you've done it, whether you're fixing to do it, whether you're trying to help somebody else do it. Somebody share with us on step 5. You never know when you're going to drop a little word that's going to help somebody in this room, because that's what this program's all about. There's a mic over here. Is this the only one we have, Pinky? And one over here. Could one of my gals get up and share on step 5? Just a few minutes, because that's all we have, and just give us some of your thoughts on step 5. Bobby, don't sit back there and try to hide. Would you help me a little bit? Good. See, I'm a teacher. I'm used to, if I don't get any volunteers, you do it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bobby Willie. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Bobby.
This was a long time, a step that took me a long time to do. And it was, step 4 took me a long time to do, too. So therefore, 5 was naturally going to be a long time. And yet, when I got to do this step, I did it with a very beautiful lady. And I think really I was afraid of really looking at me and examining me and talking about me. I had done this with God, and that was easy to do. But in order to complete this step, I must talk to another human being. And I never liked talking about things I had done to other people. And the greatest thing that happened to me with this step was the freedom that I received from this step. And I was able to tell this individual and be so completely honest. And it just rolled out. And this lady also shared with me. And I think if nothing more, it enabled me, it gave me tools to work with others, to be able to listen to other people, to hear their 5th step, or whatever. But it enabled me to have a better understanding. This lady shared her life. And you see, step 5 isn't just a one-sided step. To me, it is like this whole program. It is sharing back and forth. It was. I thought it was just going to be me on right on the podium, and it isn't like that at all. I'd heard so many times in AA, be careful who you take your step 5 with. You don't want to spread around AA. I am one of those that has never found this to be so. I have never heard of a step 5 being the person that took this, the person that was on the individual blabbing this around. And I think that's a dangerous statement for people to say in AA, and I hear it not often, but I hear it enough that it bothers me. And we're all in this program for the joy of living. That's what we came here for. We sure, for me, I didn't know what living was, and so that for me to listen to someone else's 5th step and go and tell, well, I know what Mary Jane did, and this is what she did. This is not the thing, because it didn't happen to me, and I don't think it's happened to any one of us. It's a step of, as I said, freedom, and it was enabled me to look at me, to be able to share my innermost thoughts of my past life with other people, with another person. And I was just so grateful that I had done it, and this opened the door for me to continue to grow, to continue to work the program and complete. And from there on, I went like gangbusters. But this was sort of a stalling point in my life. And to those of you who may not have done step 5 or step 4, do it. You have been given the tools, and you'll be receiving more thoughts from Joe and Charlie later as to this step 4, and then carry on with 5. It is a wonderful step, and it's the only way to go. Thanks, Willie.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, I think they gave us that caution in the beginning, and I think that what is meant by that so many times is the fact that if we do have something in our past that entails the law, the IRS, things like this, that we do have to be a little more cautious. I shared with a beautiful woman one time, and she's now deceased, and she told me about embezzling a great deal of money, and that she had never been caught. And 15 years had gone by, and she still hadn't been caught. So I think it's those kind of things that they cautioned in the beginning, because there were so many people in deep, deep trouble with the law, and we do have to be a little cautious. But I'm like you, I haven't heard, as far as my inventory, it wasn't all that big a deal. It amounted, when I talked with Rose, it amounted to trying to find out who I was, and to let her help me by sharing with me, which she did. She shared with me her 5th step as we went along, to know what I could be. And that was so important to me, because I knew I wanted to be something other than what I had become. I didn't even want to go back to being like I was. I wanted to be better, which is my desire every day. Does anyone else have anything else? I'm not going to go too far into step 5, because Charlie and Joe come along beautifully. Okay, I want to leave us with this one thought then. A man told me one time, he said, Willie, we all stumble and fall in life, but a person isn't a failure until he says that somebody pushed him. And that helped me so much. Because I think when I got to that step 5, I quit saying I did it because, or I'm going to do it because of what somebody else did, or what somebody else said, or somebody else thought about me. So many times it was what I thought they thought, which was making myself far more important than I ever was. Because Rose said to me, Willie, when you get to thinking you're so important, honey, Just stick your little old finger in a bucket of water and pull it out and look at the hole you made. So it helped me so much to quit turning around and saying, he made me do it. Or I'm doing this because. Thank you. See you all tomorrow.